Canadian Aboriginal syllabic writing, or simply syllabics, is a family of abugidas used to write a number of Aboriginal Canadian languages of the Algonquian, Inuit, and Athabaskan language families. They are valued for the distinctiveness from the Latin script of the dominant languages and for the ease with which literacy can be achieved. Indeed, by the late 19th century the Cree had achieved what may have been one of the highest rates of literacy in the world. Canadian syllabics are currently used to write all of the Cree languages from Naskapi to the Rocky Mountains, including Eastern Cree, Woods Cree, Swampy Cree and Plains Cree. They are also used to write Inuktitut in the Eastern Canadian Arctic. They are co-official with the Latin script in the territory of Nunavut. They are used regionally for the other large Canadian Algonquian language, Ojibwe, in Western Canada, as well as for Blackfoot, where they are obsolete. Among the Athabaskan languages further to the west, syllabics have been used at one point or another to write Dakel, Chipuyan, Slavey, Tlicho and Danes-They. Syllabics have occasionally been used in the United States by communities that straddle the border, but are principally a Canadian phenomenon. Basic principles. Canadian syllabic scripts are not syllabaries, in which every consonant-vowel sequence has a separate glyph, but abugidas, in which consonants are modified in order to indicate an associated vowel, in this case through a change in orientation, which is unique to Canadian syllabics. In Cree, for example, the consonant P has the shape of a chevron. In an upward orientation, it transcribes the syllable pi. Inverted, so that it points downwards, it transcribes P. Pointing to the left, it is pa, and to the right, po. The consonant forms and the vowels are represented vary from language to language, but generally approximate their Cree origins. Asterisk. The obsolete SP series, which is not supported by Unicode, is here represented by Latin and Cyrillic letters. There is no good substitution for SPI. The clockwise 90 degrees rotation relates vowels as the later series SH does, but unlike later Inuktitut consonants, because the script is presented in syllabic charts and learned as a syllabary, it is often considered to be such. Indeed, computer fonts have separate coding points for each syllable, and the Unicode Consortium considers syllabics to be a featural syllabary, along with such scripts as Hangul, where each block represents a syllable, but consonants and vowels are indicated independently. This is unlike a true syllabary, where each combination of consonant and vowel has an independent form that is unrelated to other syllables with the same consonant or vowel. Syllabic and final consonant forms the original script, which was designed for Swampy Cree, had 10 such letter forms, 8 for syllables based on the consonants P, T, C, K, M, N, S, Y, another for vowel initial syllables, and finally a blended form, now obsolete, for the consonant cluster SP. All were written with a light line to show the vowel was short and a heavier line to show the vowel was long. Ka. One consonant, W, had no letter form of its own but was indicated by a diacritic on another syllable. This is because it could combine with any of the consonants, as in KW, as well as existing on its own, as in Wa. There were distinct letters for the 9 consonants P, T, C, K, M, N, S, Y, and W when they occurred at the end of a syllable. In addition, 4 final consonants had no syllabic forms, H, L, R, and the sequence HK. These were originally written midline, but are now superscripted. The consonants L and O were marginal, only found in borrowings, baby talk, and the like. These and H could occur before vowels, but were written with the final shape regardless. Vowel transformations. The vowels fall into 2 sets, the back vowels a and o, and the front vowels e and I. Each set consists of a lower vowel a or e and a higher vowel o or y. In all cases, back vowel syllables are related through left-right reflection, that is, they are mirror images of each other. How they relate to front vowel syllables depends on the graphic form of the consonants. These follow two patterns. Symmetrical vowel p, t, s, p are rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise, while those that are asymmetrical top to bottom c, k, m, n, s, y are rotated 180 degrees. The lower front vowel syllables are derived this way from the low back vowel syllables, and the high front vowel syllables are derived this way from the higher back vowel syllables. The symmetrical letter forms can be illustrated by arranging them into a diamond, and the asymmetrical letter forms can be illustrated by arranging them into a square. These forms are present in most syllabic scripts with sounds values that approach the Swampy Cree origins. For example, all scripts except the one for Blackfoot use the triangle for vowel initial syllables. By 1841, when Evans cast the first movable type for syllabics, he found that he could not satisfactorily maintain the distinction between light and heavy typeface for short and long vowels. Instead, filed across the raised lines of the type, leaving gaps in the printed letter for long vowels. This can be seen in early printings. Later still a dot diacritic, originally used for vowel length only in handwriting, was extended to print. Thus today a contrasts with a, and me contrasts with me. Although Cree only occurs long, the script made length distinctions for all four vowels. Not all writers then and now indicate length, or do not do so consistently. Since there is no contrast, no one today writes C as a long vowel, pointing, reflecting the shorthand principles on which it was based. Syllabics may be written plain, indicating only the basic consonant-vowel outline of speech, or pointed, with diacritics for vowel length and the consonants with and per hour. Full phonemic pointing is rare. Syllabics may also be written without word division, as Devanagari once was, or with spaces or dots between words or prefixes. Punctuation. The only punctuation found in many texts is spacing between words and for a full stop. Punctuation from the Latin script, including the period, may also be used. Due to the final Z resembling a hyphen, a double hyphen is used as the Canadian Aboriginal syllabics hyphen. Glossary. Some common terms as used in the context of syllabics: syllables, or full-size letters. The full-sized characters, whether standing for consonant-vowel combinations of vowels alone, are usually called syllables. They may be phonemic rather than morphophonemic syllables. That is, when one morpheme ends in a consonant and the next begins with a vowel. The intermediate consonant is written as a syllable with the following vowel. For example, the Plains Cree word pihcayihk indoors has pihc as its first morpheme and ay as its second, but is written pih California yihk. In other cases, a syllable may in fact represent only a consonant, again due to the underlying structure of the language. In Plains Cree, Tanisi, hello, or how are you, is written as if it had three syllables, because the first syllable has the stress and the syllable that follows has a short I. The vowel is dropped. As a result, the word is pronounced tansi with only two syllables. Syllabication is important to determining stress in Algonquian languages, and vice versa. So this ambiguity in syllabics is relatively important in Algonquin languages. Series. The word series is used for either a set of syllables with the same vowel, or a set with the same initial consonant. Thus the N series is the set of syllables that begin with N, and the O series is the set of syllables that have O as the vowel regardless of their initial consonant. Finals, or reduced letters. A series of small raised letters are called finals. They are usually placed after a syllable to indicate a final consonant, as the HK and YIHK above. However, a Cree consonant H, which only has a final form, begins a small number of function words such as haw. In such cases, the final represents an initial consonant and therefore precedes the syllable. The use of diacritics to write consonants is unusual in abugidas. However, it also occurs in the lepcha script. Finals are commonly employed in the extension of syllabics to languages it was not initially designed for. In some of the Athabaskan alphabets, finals have been extended to appear at mid-height after a syllable, lowered after a syllable, and at mid-height before a syllable. For example, Chipewyan and Slavey use the final in the latter position to indicate the initial consonant DL. In Naskapi, a small raised letter based on SAR is used for consonant clusters that begin with per second, SPW, SDW, SKW, and SCWA. The Cree languages the script was initially designed for had no such clusters. In Inuktitut, something similar is used not to indicate sequences but to represent additional consonants, rather as the digraphs CH, SH, TH were used to extend the Latin letters C, S, T to represent additional consonants in English. In Inuktitut, a raised nagar is placed before the G series, to form an eng series, and a raised ra is placed before syllables of the K series, to form a uvulate U series. Although the forms of these series have two parts, each is encoded into the Unicode standard as a single character. Diacritics. Other marks placed above or beside the syllable are called diacritics. These include the dot placed above a syllable to mark a long vowel, as in me, and the dot placed at mid-height after the syllable or before the syllable to indicate a medial W, as in KWA. These are all encoded as single characters in Unicode. Diacritics used by other languages include a circle above, two dots before, and a variety of other marks. Such diacritics may or may not be separately encoded into Unicode. There is no systematic way to distinguish elements that are parts of syllables from diacritics, or diacritics from finals, and academic discussions of syllabics are often inconsistent in the terminology. Points and pointing. The diacritic mark used to indicate vowel length is often referred to as a point. Syllabics users do not always consistently mark vowel length, W or H. A text with these marked is called a pointed text. One without such marks is said to be unpointed. Syllabaries and Syllabics. The word syllabary has two meanings: a writing system with a separate character for each syllable, but also a table of syllables, including any script arranged in a syllabic chart. Evans's Latin Ojibwe alphabet, for example, was presented as a syllabary. Canadian Aboriginal syllabics. The script itself is thus distinct from a syllabary that displays them. History. Cree syllabics were created in 1840 by English missionary James Evans for two languages, Swampy Cree and Ojibwe. He had been inspired by the success of Sequoia's Cherokee syllabary after encountering problems with Latin-based alphabets, and drew on his knowledge of Devanagari and shorthand. In turn, Cree syllabics would influence the Pollard script in China. Other missionaries were reluctant to use it, but it was rapidly indigenized and spread to new communities before missionaries arrived. So in Cree legend after 1840 it was thought to have originated from Cree culture. James Evans. In 1827, James Evans, a missionary from Kingston upon Hull, England, was placed in charge of the Wesleyan mission at Rice Lake, Ontario. Here, he began to learn the Eastern Ojibwe language spoken in the area and was part of a committee to devise a Latin alphabet for it. By 1837 he had prepared the speller and interpreter in English and Indian, but was unable to get its printed printing sanctioned by the British and Foreign Bible Society. At the time, many missionary societies were opposed to the development of native literacy in their own languages, believing that the situation would be bettered by linguistic assimilation into colonial society. Evans continued to use his Ojibwe orthography in his work in Ontario. As was common at the time, the orthography called for hyphens between the syllables of words, giving written Ojibwe a partially syllabic structure. However, his students appear to have had conceptual difficulties using the same alphabet for two different languages with very different sounds, and Evans himself found this approach awkward. Furthermore, the Ojibwe language was polysynthetic but had few distinct syllables, meaning that most words had a large number of syllables. This made them quite long when written with the Latin script. He began to experiment with creating a more syllabic script that he thought might be less awkward for his students to use. In 1840, Evans was relocated to Norway House in northern Manitoba. Here he began learning the local Swampy Cree dialect. Like Ojibwe, to which it was quite closely related, it was full of long polysyllabic words. As an amateur linguist, Evans was acquainted with the Devanagari script used in British India. In Devanagari, each letter stands for a syllable, and is modified to represent the vowel of that syllable. Such a system, now called an abugida, readily lent itself to writing a language such as Swampy Cree, which had a simple syllable structure of only 8 consonants and 4 long or short vowels. Evans was also familiar with British shorthand, presumably Samuel Taylor's universal stenography, from his days as a merchant in England, and now he acquired familiarity with the newly published Pitman shorthand of 1837. Origins. Both Devanagari and Pitman played a role in the development of Cree syllabics. Devanagari provided the glyphs for the syllables, whereas Pitman provided the glyphs for the final consonants, as well as the idea of rotation and line weight to modify the syllables. In the original Evans script, there were 10 syllabic forms, 8 for the consonants P, T, C, K, M, N, S, Y, a 9th for vowel initial syllables or vowels following one of the incidental consonants, and a 10th, which is no longer in use, for the consonant cluster SP. There were 4 incidental consonants, R, L, W, H, which did not have syllabic forms, except for SP. These can all be traced to the cursive combining forms of the corresponding Devanagari akshara. The Devanagari combining form is somewhat abbreviated, and in handwriting the running horizontal line may be left off as well, as has been standardized in Gujarati. The likeness is stronger if one allows the symbols to rotate to give a similar direction of writing for each vowel. For example, Devanagari N has the orientation of ni rather than of na. The motivation for the change of orientation appears to have been to allow the pen to trace the same direction when writing syllables with the same vowels. The reflection class Ka, California, Martsa, Ya all follow an L-like path, whereas the rotation class A, Pa, Ta, Na all follow a C-like path. The orientation of Devanagari G, N, Y, and possibly S had to be flipped for this to happen, because Cree consonants can be either voiced or voiceless, depending on their environment. Each corresponds to 2 Devanagari letters. Cree Ka, Ga, for example, resembles Devanagari G rather than K. Note also that H, which only occurs as a final in syllabics, appears to derive from the Devanagari Visaga H, which also occurs only as a final, rather than from syllabic Ha. Asterisk cursive is more similar to, looking rather like M. It is possible that L and R were derived through rotation from one Devanagari glyph, in the spirit of Pitman, where L and R are related in this way, rather than from the two different glyphs suggested by the table. In contrast, the final consonants PTCKMNS and Y, which are now only used for Western Cree, derive from Pitman shorthand. The linear glyphs PTCK are rotated 45 degrees from Pitman PTCK, but keep the relative orientations intact. The lunate glyphs MNS are rotated 90 degrees from Pitman MNS. The Cree final I was originally a dot, as was the diacritic for the vowel I in Pitman. The final HK, however, is a small version of the Greek letter chi kh, chosen because chi is a logogram for Christ. The use of rotation to change the vowel of a syllable is unique to Canadian syllabics, but had its antecedent in shorthand. Pitman used rotation to change place of articulation. Plosives PTCHK, nasals MN, and fricatives HSSHFDH were all related through rotation, as can be partially seen in the table of finals above. Initially, Evans indicated vowel length with light versus heavy lines, but this proved awkward in print, and by 1841 it was changed to broken lines for long vowels versus solid lines for short vowels. Later, Evans introduced the current practices of writing a dot above the syllable to indicate vowel length. Adoption and use. The local Cree community quickly took to this new writing system. Cree people began to use it to write messages on tree bark using burnt sticks, leaving messages out on hunting trails far from the mission. Evans believed that it was well adapted to native Canadian languages, particularly the Algonquian languages with which he was familiar. He claimed that, with some slight alterations, it could be used to write every language from the Atlantic to the Rocky Mountains. Evans attempted to secure a printing press and new type to publish materials in this writing system. Here, he began to face resistance from colonial and European authorities. The Hudson's Bay Company, which had a monopoly on foreign commerce in Western Canada, refused to import a press for him, believing that native literacy was something to be discouraged. Evans, with immense difficulty, constructed his own press and type and began publishing in syllabics. Evans left Canada in 1846 and died shortly thereafter. However, the ease and utility of syllabic writing ensured its continued survival, despite European resistance to supporting it. In 1849, the Anglican Bishop of Rupert's Land reported that a few of the Indians can read by means of these syllabic characters, but if they had only been taught to read their own language in our letters, it would have been one step towards the acquisition of the English tongue. But syllabics had taken root among the Cree, and in 1861, 15 years after Evans had died, the British and Foreign Bible Society published a Bible in Cree syllabics. By then, both Protestant and Catholic missionaries were using and actively propagating syllabic writing. Missionary work in the 1850s and 1860s spread syllabics to Western Canadian Ojibwe dialects, but it was not often used over the border by Ojibwe in the United States. Missionaries who had learned Evans's system spread it east across Ontario and into Quebec, reaching all Cree language areas as far east as the Naskapi, Athabaskan, Montagnais and Inuit people in eastern Quebec and Labrador use Latin alphabets. In 1856, John Horden, an Anglican missionary at Moose Factory, Ontario, who adapted syllabics to the local James Bay Cree dialect, met a group of Inuit from the region of Grande Rivière de la Baleine in northern Quebec. They were very interested in adapting Cree syllabics to the language. He prepared a few based on the pronunciation of Inuktitut, but it quickly became obvious that the number of basic sounds and the simple model of the syllable in the Evans system was inadequate to the language. With the assistance of Edwin Arthur Watkins, he dramatically modified syllabics to reflect these needs. In 1876, the Anglican Church hired Edmund Peck to work full-time in the mission at Great Whale River, teaching syllabics to the Inuit and translating materials into syllabics. His work across the Arctic is usually credited with the establishment of syllabics among the Inuit, with the support of both Anglican and Catholic missionary societies. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Inuit were propagating syllabics themselves. In the 1880s, John William Timms, an Anglican missionary from Great Britain, invented a number of new forms to write the Blackfoot language. French Roman Catholic missionaries were the primary force for expanding syllabics to Athabaskan languages in the late 19th century. The Oblate Missionary Order was particularly active in using syllabics in missionary work. Oblate Father Adrian Gabriel Morris adapted syllabics to Dakhel, inventing a large number of new basic characters to support the radically more complicated phonetics of Athabaskan languages. Father Emil Petitut developed syllabic scripts for many of the Athabaskan languages of the Northwest Territories, including Slavi and Chipewyan. Cree influenced the design of the Pollard script in China.